Hey, what is up everyone? This is Nishi from MST.TV here, and today I am bringing you all my ban list prediction for the January 2022 ban list. I am still not used to hearing or saying 2022 quite yet, but yeah, that's where we are. Now, I feel like my prediction list this time around was a little bit more aggressive than what we could end up seeing. I think that generally, winter ban lists aren't too crazy, but here I have 4 cards banned and a couple of cards limited, which is a bit much, but in my defense, ideally I want the hits across the board to be kind of consistent as well. So let's get right into it. So kicking things off in the ban section, we first have Artifact Scythe, which I don't think is a surprise to anybody. The ability to lock your opponent out of the extra deck completely for an entire turn is really strong, and with the game as fast paced as it is today, this essentially means that your opponent doesn't get to play the game at all this turn, and you should be winning and OTKing them the following turn. This card was already good when it was just being summoned with Artifact Sanctum, but now it doesn't even feel like a brick since you can consistently pop this card and proc its effect from your back row with the effect of Destroy Phoenix Enforcer. Now sure, there are ways to play around it with people teching in cards like Cosmic Cyclone and Forbidden Chalice, but I feel like it isn't healthy for the game when you have to hold your Chalice for Scythe instead of trying to disrupt your opponent's other cards, because otherwise you're just straight up gonna lose the game. So yeah, this card being banned doesn't take away from how good Destroy Phoenix Enforcer is or anything like that, but it definitely makes it so that you don't just lose the game automatically because you don't have an out right at that specific moment. And for that reason, I'm expecting to see Scythe in the ban section whenever the list drops. The next card I have here is Archnemesis, Protos being banned as well. Now initially I was inclined to say that Protos would be untouched after the list, and I still kind of think that, mostly because it's just such a strong tool for the Sword Soul strategy, and Sword Soul is a deck that Konami still wants to push people to pick up and try out, them being fairly new. However, if we're going to say that Scythe should be banned for basically skipping your opponent's turn, then I think that for the same reason you would have to have Protos banned as well. Protos isn't too crazy in every single matchup, and abusing it isn't as simple as when you're abusing Scythe. If you're playing against like Sword Soul in the mirror match or against Bird Up, you have to find a way to get that water or wind monster onto the field with Protos to blow it up and then lock your opponent out of that attribute from there. However, this card can be extremely devastating against Phantom Knights or any sort of dark-based strategy, because you can summon this card and then basically lock your opponent out of the game for multiple turns in a row just for free. Now this card does really feel similar to Scythe in my opinion. Sure, there are ways to play around it or prevent it from resolving, but if you don't draw those answers, then in a lot of matchups you just don't get to play the game against this card. Overall though, because it is a little bit more specific and can only be abused by the Sword Soul strategy, I could see this card getting through the list untouched, but ultimately for the sake of consistency with the banning of Scythe, I do think that we're going to see Protos get banned as well. So I guess the theme of my ban section here is let's get rid of cards that don't allow you to play the game at all, because the third ban I have here in the ban section is none other than Shaddoll Winda. Now despite how long it has been since Shaddolls and Winda have been in the game, the release of Schism has definitely shown how scary Winda can be, allowing you to make Winda during your opponent's turn. But just like Scythe and Protos, right, if you don't have an out to Winda, you don't get to play Yu-Gi-Oh! At all, which I just don't think is something we want to see in the game. On one hand, there are more outs to bringing out Winda, since you can disrupt the Schism or the App Cologne, make the card harder to bring out. However, Winda also doesn't activate its effect, so at the same time, right, you can't Gamma on the Winda or anything like that. Sure, you have the Kaiju or Chalice, but that's only if you manage to draw the out, and do remember that Winda itself can't be destroyed by card effects, which is kind of insane to have that built-in protection on top of that Floodgate effect. So yeah, I know some people think that you should hit the Schism, but I do think that Schism is actually a pretty reasonably strong card on its own for the Shaddoll strategy, so I think that Winda is another card that is going to end up banned just because of how oppressive it can be. Alright guys, one last ban here, and I think this one should be pretty easy to see coming. It is Predaplant, Verte, Anaconda. So I don't know about you guys, but I feel like fusions are just getting splashed into absolutely everything. People are just adding fusion packages into their decks because of how free they can be. It has gotten to the point where if I can find a couple of extra spots in my extra deck and don't mind playing a couple of extra bricks in the main deck, the power ceiling of my deck just shoots through the roof if I have the resources to follow this relatively simple line of play. With Branded Fusion coming into the game in just a few months, I do think that hitting Verte is almost kind of necessary, especially given how generic the engine is. I know that in the OCG, they did ban Fusion Destiny, which I think makes DPE unusable, but I don't think they're going to do that here since DPE did just come out, and Konami will definitely want to use it to help push upcoming product. However, it really does feel like hitting Verte isn't going to affect DPE at all, since most builds are running 3 copies of Fusion Destiny, since it's not really overly restrictive. At the same time, I think that banning Verte will stop Dragoon from being splashed into just any random deck, not that it's seeing too much play right now anyways, while you can still go into it with other strategies like the Dark Magician deck. But yeah, with the power and popularity that all of these fusion monsters and engines have shown over the last little while, it definitely feels like Verte Anaconda is a card that needs to end up on the next ban list. So that is all for the ban section. I definitely think that there is an argument to be made for both Imperial Order and Mystic Mind to be on the list. Now, to be fair, I think they would have to hit both cards kind of at the same time, not just one or the other. But ultimately, I don't feel like Konami is going to go ahead and just ban 6 cards straight up like that. I do think that Imperial Order and Mystic Mind are going to stick around for a little bit longer at least. Anyways, we are on to the limited section now, and my first limit is going to be Magical Meltdown. I think that like everyone knows what this card is by now, obviously, but I think that it's finally time to hit the Invoked engine. The engine on its own is just incredibly consistent, and Dogmatica Invoked is a really strong deck right now and has been for a while. I think that Meltdown with Fusion Destiny and the ability to pop a card with DPE and not give your opponent a chance to respond is just kind of ridiculous. Invoked may not be the best deck of the format right now, but I feel like it has been a borderline contender for quite a while, and the release of DPE just made it that little bit extra too strong. Now, limiting Meltdown doesn't by any means kill off the strategy or make it no longer viable, but it does hurt the strategy's consistency and lowers the chances of players opening with Meltdown and Fusion Destiny every single game. So the next limit I have here is Lyrilusc Recital Starling, which I think would be necessary given the other hits on this list to stop Bird Up from becoming an overly dominant strategy. Now, Bird Up is already insanely strong in the current format, and so I am afraid that if we hit Protos, Scythe, and Winda, we could see birds run rampant and just take over the format completely, so I definitely think that it's necessary to hit the deck in some way. I feel like it doesn't make any sense to hit any of the small birds. They all kind of feel like they do a lot of the same things and they're kind of interchangeable. The other cards I considered hitting were Barrier Statue of the Stormwinds, which doesn't really seem realistic with the existence of the other barrier statues, or the Simorgh Link monster, which I think could be a possibility, but it's not a big enough hit considering that it's not necessarily even something that the deck goes into all the time. Now, limiting Recital Starling is somewhat of a hit to the deck's consistency. You can still use Wagtail to search Bird Call, and then also search with Cobalt Sparrow in addition to your 1 copy of Recital Starling that you have access to, but you don't get multiple Recital Starling searches, and I think that your sequencing does become more important and a little bit less forgiving when you're playing the deck. It would also hopefully lead to a little bit more variety with bird combos, forcing them to adapt if they still want to go into something like Utopic Draco Future. So yeah, overall, I do think that limiting Recital Starling is a big enough hit to tone down just what the deck can do and force it to play a little bit differently, but still leave it as a legitimate contender this format. Alright, the last limit here I think might seem a bit like overkill, but I also have Tri-Brigade Fractal going to 1. Now, last ban list, I guess we did have Tenki go to 1 as our Tri-Brigade hit, but with Tenki to 1 and 3 Fractal, it's still like you have 4 copies of Fractal in your deck. I think that Fractal is just kind of an annoying card because it makes the entire Tri-Brigade engine just so free, allowing you to dump Kit and then dump Nerval, and then searching for another Tri-Brigade monster, right? It effectively just allows you to use Tri-Brigade Fractal to replace itself with another Tri-Brigade, but also getting 3 Beast Family monsters in your graveyard in the process. Now, with 1 Fractal, you do still have that power play, but it's not something that you can pull off every single turn repeatedly. Now, in this spot, I did also consider limiting Revolt, but I don't really see too many pure Tri-Brigade decks running around in the current format anymore, so I don't feel like hitting Revolt would address any sort of issue with the Tri-Brigades that we are currently seeing. And also, I could see limiting Nerval as an answer, which could also happen in place of hitting Fractal. I do think that hitting either Fractal or Nerval would be a pretty reasonable hit and would accomplish effectively the same thing. helping to tone down the consistency of these power plays for the Tri-Brigade strategy. Okay, so guys, from here, the rest of the list I think should be pretty straightforward, nothing too crazy, nothing that requires too much of an explanation. For semi-limits, I have 2 cards. The first one that's getting hit is Nadir Servant, which, to be fair, I could also see staying at 3. We've seen a little bit more use of the Dogmatica package recently. The engine is still really strong with a deck like Dogmatica invoked. However, I could definitely see Konami hitting the Dogmatica engine lightly, just to hurt its consistency as an engine. Of course, this doesn't make the engine unusable or bad or anything like that. It just means that the package is going to be that little bit less consistent. With all of the Dogmatica stuff being reprinted in the 2021 Megatins, Konami doesn't really have much more to gain from the Dogmatica package still being in the game. I definitely think that what they could be doing instead is pushing other splashable engines such as the Brave Token engine coming in the Grand Creators so that those new things can be combined with other strategies instead. The other card I have semi-limited here is Salamangreat Circle, which, let's be honest, isn't going to make Salamangrates meta relevant all of a sudden. I think they're just kind of like this tier 2, tier 2.5 deck in my mind. If the deck is winning, it's just because of like hand traps and the ability to make access code talker out of nowhere, but the Salamangrate cards themselves are just kind of average at this point. I think it doesn't matter if it's Gazelle or Circle. It would just be kind of cool to see some Salamangrate stuff slowly get peeled off the list over the next couple of formats. Alright, and then finally the unlimited stuff. I think it's mostly just cleanup, right? Like Skullcrabat Joker, Nessie, they both went from 1 to 2. People were kinda hyped for them initially and thought they were worth noting. Neither of them ended up doing anything relevant at all. I think it's pretty safe to peel them off from 2 to 3 now. Red Eyes Darkness Metal Dragon has that errata that made it a hard once per turn, so that can peel off without any consequences. I guess the only one that's really worth noting is Emergency Teleport, because I guess there might be a chance that Virtual World does something, probably not anything too crazy. There's still no true King of all calamities. There is also that little package that people might try playing with Ghost Ogre and Snow Rabbit and Psyframe Gear Gamma as hand trap tuners that are also E-Tele targets, but I don't think that moving the card from 2 to 3 is going to make that engine broken all of a sudden, so that should be fine. Anyways guys, that is my ban list prediction for the January 2022 ban list. If you guys did enjoy the video, please let me know by hitting that thumbs up button for me. Also, let me know what you guys think about the cards I have banned, limited, semi-limited, and unlimited. Let me know if you guys think my predictions are spot on or if they're going to be wrong. Also, post your own predictions in the comment section down below. Let's see who's right. Also guys, if you haven't already, do make sure that you hit that subscribe button to get all of the latest and greatest content from both Tombox and myself. And until next time guys, don't forget to hold on to your MST.TV.